So today I'm going to go over elongation and foreshortening by demonstrating it with this like little jar thing that I have with markers on it. The whole point is to show you that elongation and foreshortening can be a good thing. Sometimes we want it, like when we're doing an oblique view, so that we can remove superimposition. But sometimes it happens accidentally, like when we're doing portables, and that can cause bad things to happen, so we need to fix that. So to demonstrate that, I have this jar, and you can see this is my elongation jar. I have a whole bunch of stuff on here that are taped at like 90 degrees to each other. I have a paper clip in here and a little washer at the bottom, because when I take an x-ray, everything's going to be superimposed. And then I'm going to show you that when I make it an oblique, things do not become superimposed, right? And then when I go lateral, suddenly I'm going to be able to see things that I wasn't able to see before. So reason why we do all of these things. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a regular AP x-ray, I guess you could say, of this, right? The worksheet says elongation is seen with elongation is seen with angling of the, pause for dramatic effect, tube or IR, and then foreshortening is seen with angling of the part. So when we go to do the oblique, that is going to technically be foreshortening. But as always, first things first, we got to take an x-ray of our jar and set a proper technique. So here's my APPA, whatever you want to call it, picture of the jar, right? And we see superimposition. We used a technique of 53 at 2.8 mass. It gave us a dose of 11, an EI of 228, and a DI of -3. Oh boy, -3, how are we gonna fix it? Pause again for a dramatic effect. Okay. So hopefully you know that if we shoot a -3, the best option to fix it would be to bring KVP up 15%, right? So I take my 53 times 0.15. That gives me about 8. So I'm going to take that original 53. I'm going to add 8. It tells me that I should change my KVP to 61. So I'll change my KVP to 61, leave my mass alone, and that should bring me up from a -3 to about a 0. By bringing KVP up, tell me all the things. What's going to happen to the dose? It's going to go up, right? But it's not going to double. It's not going to go to 22. What's going to happen with a higher KVP to my scale of contrast? High KVP is going to give us long scale contrast, more grays. It's also going to give us decreased contrast, or gosh, what's the other one? Why can't I think? I don't know. But long scale contrast, right? So this picture is going to be short scale, and then when I do my 15% roll, you can see that it's going to add some grays to the picture. You can see that we went up to 61 at 2.8. Our dose did go up to 17. Like I said, it went up, but it didn't double. If I would have doubled mass, it would have doubled the dose completely. It brought the EI to 491 and a DI to -0.07. So again, basically perfect. So this is our perfect zero picture. We're going to work on that. And the next thing I'm going to do is add an oblique view and see how that's going to change things. Now we're going to do an oblique view of the jar. And basically what I'm going to do is kind of like an oblique when we do it, oblique, however you want to say it, when we're doing it in positioning, right? So like if I'm doing a hand x-ray, I would do my PA view, and then I would angle my part about 45 degrees and then all the way up for the lateral. So that's what we're going to do. It's just a generality, just to see why we do this, right? So to do that, I'm going to grab a little sponge here. I think this is a 30-degree sponge. I'm going to put this up like this. Make sure I'm still centered. Okay. And then we'll see what that looks like on our picture. Now, our last picture was basically a zero picture. On this, because I have angled the body part, will I still shoot a 0? Right? So think about that. This is when the plus minus charts come in handy, right? So you got to know all of the things that adding OID is going to do. This is OID. Even though it's an angle on only part of the part, it's still going to be OID. So think plus minus charts. When I think OID, what happens to IR exposure? So if I have no OID, but then I bring it up, What happens to IR exposure? As soon as X-ray hits anything, scatter is going to miss the image receptor, which means IR exposure is going to go down. With that being said, if scatter is missing the image receptor, what happens to contrast? It's going to go up. It's going to become shorter scale, right? Because now those grays are missing the image receptor. As I add OID, what happens to distortion? So as I add OID, do you see how my shadow is getting bigger and bigger? Make that bigger and bigger for you if you want. So it's like right here, no shadow, not really. Then up here it becomes big old creepy hand shadow. So if I increase my distortion, what will happen to spatial resolution? You can see that the detail is a lot better right here than it is up here. It just becomes like this magnified blob, right? So all of these things are going to happen even though we're just doing a tiny little OID on just part of the jar. So IR exposure is going to go down just a little bit because this OID is going to allow scatter to hit here and miss it, right? Miss the image receptor. So IR exposure is going to go down. Contrast is going to go up just a little bit because we're going to have some of those grays missing it. And then in addition, because of that OID, we are going to have some magnification, which means spatial resolution is going to go down. But what kind of magnification do we have? What kind of distortion? Remember, we have size and we have shape distortion. This is going to be, pause for dramatic effect. So if I'm angling my part, I'm going to have foreshortening. I have to think for a second. Okay. Keep in mind that if a patient can't do this, you might have to angle your tube to create an artificial oblique image. So that's what you're going to probably see when you go out to trauma and stuff. But remember, in that case, what you're doing is you're artificially creating an angle on the patient, right? They're straight, but you're going to be adding an angle on the tube to create an oblique image, which basically means that it's going to be elongation now and not foreshortening. So, okay, so here's our zero picture, right? 61, 2.8 gave us a dose of 17, EI 491, and basically a zero technique. But we can see that we have superimposition, right? So like I can tell that there's something going on here, but I can't make out what this is right here. I can't make out what this is right here. I can tell there's something there, but I can't tell what it actually is. However, I can see the triangle at the bottom of the jar. I can see this washer, and I can see this paper clip really well, right? Let's pretend the paper clip is like your spine, right? And this circle, the washer, is like a tumor. So as you can see right now, the spine is superimposing on top of the washer. So I can't tell completely how big the tumor is. So this is why we do oblique views and stuff, so that we can see anatomy in different ways. So I'm going to be able to see my markers better. I'm going to be able to see this quote unquote tumor better in my spine, all that. But in the process, by doing an oblique view, keep in mind I am now going to have foreshortening because I am angling the part. But now I can see that washer without superimposition on part of it, right? So between the two pictures, I should be able to figure out what size that tumor actually is. I can make out this 2 marker. I can still tell that there's something here, but I'm not angled in the directions to be able to tell them. But now let's talk about what happened when I added this OID. Remember I told you all the things. IR exposure was going to go down. Boom. Oh, that's like fuzzy. Negative 0.86, right? Because by adding OID, it's going to allow that scatter to miss the image receptor, which scatter is ultimately IR exposure. So IR exposure is going to go down just a little bit, which means when you're doing your oblique views, you should be increasing technique just a little bit. Tiny bit, maybe like an extra, like if I was at 61 and 2.8, maybe I'd go up to 63, 64 at 2.8, or maybe I would do 61 at 3.2 mass. Really, the KVP way would be better, but it depends on which KV that you're at. You know, like a spine, you're not going to want to be changing the KV as much. So anyways, time and place for everything. Basically, I want to try to get this DI of negative 0.86 closer to a 0. So when you do an oblique view, know that you're going to lose some IR exposure, which you're losing gray. So this picture should be higher contrast. It's not like we're going to really notice a difference on that, but Maybe AI can tell. And then in addition, now we're going to have foreshortening, right? So now we are causing like this jar up here to be foreshortened on top of itself. The markers are going to still be stacked on themselves. And this is going to be a foreshortened too. It does allow us to see it, but now it's foreshortened. It's not like it's normal 2 shape. I mean, it actually looks like a 5 right now, but it's a 2. So basically, you know that is not what a 2 looks like, but we can kind of make out that that's what it's supposed to be because we've added foreshortening. What was the other thing? Spatial resolution is going to go down a little bit too. So the next part is we're going to do a lateral, and we're just going to turn the jar on its side, and we'll see what happens with that. So now, if I turn my jar all the way on its side, right, get rid of this sponge here. Now I'm going to be shooting a lateral picture of this jar. So again, lateral is going to allow us to see certain things better than other things. Maybe I'm going to be able to see the markers better. Maybe I'm going to see the paper clip better, but I'll show you that on the picture. Keep in mind, by making this a lateral, I have basically added OID to the top of the jar, right? Because now this part is closer. I've reduced my SOD, source to object distance, which means again, as X-ray comes in, it's going to hit this part and it's going to scatter, miss the image receptor. So what's going to happen to IR exposure? It's going to go down even more than it did on the oblique. What's going to happen to contrast? If I am having grays scatter, miss the image receptor, contrast is going to go up. What's going to happen to distortion? We're going to have more size distortion, right? Because this side is going to have a higher OID than the bottom side. So therefore we're going to have more size distortion, more magnification, which ultimately means what happens to spatial resolution? It's going to go down a little bit. Again, do we notice these things? No. But when AI is going to start reading all of our X-rays, they're going to notice it. So I just gave them a pronoun. Anyways, let's see what that looks like. So we have an oblique view. Blake, you guys keep teasing me about saying oblique and not oblique. I just think it sounds fancier. When I switch to the lateral view, notice that, look at my DI, look at that. Would you just look at that? I'm using the same technique, 61 at 2.8, right? My dose is going to be basically the same, right? Because did I change my DAP, right? Did I change my dose? No, I'm using the same technique. And did I change my area? No, basically the same size collimation. It looks like I changed collimation a little bit, and that's why that changed a little bit. That's okay. EI is now going to be a 271. DI is a negative 2.67. But wait, I literally am using the exact same technique that I used on the AP picture, right? But now I'm going to be having almost a DI of negative 3 again, right? So what does that mean? That means that when you are doing a lateral view, you're going to have to increase your technique even more. So again, oblique views are going to increase your technique maybe like a step or two, right? On a lateral, you're going to have to increase even more. Just depends on your body part, how thick it is, all of that. But notice on this lateral view, now I see my R. I can make out that that's an R marker. I can make out that that's an L marker. They're distorted, but that's okay. I can make out that 2 that looks, well, I mean, it looks like a 5 to us, but it's a 2. Okay. So now we can see this without any kind of distortion like we did. And now you can see how far that quote unquote tumor is from the quote unquote spine. So time and a place for all 3 of these things. We want elongation, angling of the tube or IR at certain times. We want foreshortening at certain times because it's going to allow us to see anatomy that we couldn't have seen otherwise because of superimposition. But as I do all of these things, remember I am going to be creating OID, so think about how it affects all your plus minus charts. And we'll move on to the next part.